Hey everybody, welcome back. I know it's been a while since I've posted an episode of the Read Write Mike podcast. As everybody knows, it's a crazy time of year, the beginning of the school year. But here we are, season 2, episode 6, and I want to talk to you a little bit about character vocabulary, the word association games that appear on day 3. There's 3 games that you're going to see in character vocabulary and in the K2 character vocabulary, and those games are going to be called word connections, fill in the blank, and last but not least, I forgot. I'm just kidding. I'll look it up right here in my notes. Pure imagination. That's the third one. So it's word connections, fill in the blank, and pure imagination. And so I'm going to walk you through some of those games. If you're watching on video, I'm going to show you some slides that are available through K2 character vocabulary and talk to you a little bit about them and what they do. So let's get started. So when you first introduce the words in days 1 and day 2, what you're playing are called example, non-example games, which is just a very basic way. Once you have taught some content to say to a learner, can you identify this content or not when I show it to you? Right? I'm going to teach you something, then I'm going to show you some examples of the thing I just taught you, or non-examples, and you have to say yes or no. After that, we want to get more deeply cognitive with these words with the kids, because we want kids using these words in their talk, and if they're ready in K2, in their writing as well. And so in order to do that, we need to go deeper than just example, non-example. And the next step cognitively, right, to learn some content would be to think about ways that you can associate the words together. So now that they have all this little bank of 3 words in the bend, they can start connecting the words to examples and contexts and situations that you provide. So a lot of the word association games are like connection games. Here's your words, here's these examples in the world. Now I want you to connect them. Now let's take a look at our first game that I want to talk about, which is word connections. So as you can see, on day 3, you'll usually have a couple of options of word association games. In this example, we have 2nd grade, the first part. There's 2 of the 3 games that you'll play on this day, and they're word connections and fill in the blank, and I want to talk to you about word connections first. So what word connections will do is you'll essentially be asking kids about what like a synonym makes you think of, right? So in this example, you can see on the screen, it'll say, which word does not paying attention make you think of? Which would be a synonym for careless. And then you'd invite kids to turn and talk and say, careless makes me think of not paying attention, because when you're careless, you're not paying attention to things and mistakes might happen, right? Here's another example. What word does helpful, make you think of, right? And the kids could take a look at the bank of words and then say, oh, supportive, because when you're supportive, you're helping people out with things and so on. You see how this goes. One of the things to notice as you move on with the parts is you'll also incorporate words from the previous parts, right? So in part 2, you might see these 3 words. In part 3, you may see some of these words as well, because I want kids to be getting some space practice and repeated retrieval practice as they're learning these words. Okay, so that's game 1. Let's take a look at game number 2. So game number 2 is going to be fill in the blank. And for those of you who are familiar with the reading units of study, word love, this is a game you're already familiar with. It's also a game that's pretty straightforward, where you'd give a sentence and that's with a blank in it, and the students would have to fill in the blank, repeat the sentence, or just say the word and say to their partner why. So it says here, if you wrote a letter to a friend who is in the hospital with a broken leg, people might call you blank. And kids can say, what would that response be? Would they be stern? Would they be careless? No, they would be supportive, because you are being thoughtful and helpful, right? To somebody who's in the hospital. Just another example. Quickly, you can see how this goes. If you said kindergartners couldn't eat snack until they finished cleaning up their toys, people might call you, what would it be? Careless, supportive, maybe probably stern. You're kind of serious about things, right? And that's what kids would respond to one another. All right, so that's fill in the blank. Pretty straightforward. As you see in these word association games, you're providing the bank of words, and you're also providing sort of a bank of examples of context and situations for them to connect the word to. So it's no longer example, noun, example, which is like yes or no. Now it's like connecting the words. Kids have to make a connection. All right, let's take a look at the third type of game that I can't seem to remember from memory. Pure imagination. That's what it calls. All right, let's look at pure imagination. Okay, now, so for pure imagination, this is a game that, it's kind of actually now that I look back at it, it's kind of a bridge between word association games and maybe generating games where kids have to generate context, situations, and examples. In this type of game, you're asking kids to connect the word to a common situation that most kids would probably face, right? And so how would this happen? So I think this is from the first grade unit. You say, what would, the word's cruel. So what would a cruel person do at a park, right? You're asking kids to connect cruelty to the park. And the kids might say, oh, they might tease other kids, things of that nature. If you take a look at another one, you say, what might an optimistic person do at the park? Or what might an optimistic person think at the park, right? And so maybe the optimistic person would be like, oh, it's raining, or the weather's not great, but the clouds were up here, or the clouds will disappear and it'll get better. Or the optimistic person will say, oh, maybe we don't have enough people for this game, but maybe we can play this game anyway. They always look on the bright side of life, things like that. So you can see what pure imagination is. It's asking kids to come up with, how do you connect this word to this common situation that we all face? What would a cautious person do at the park, right? Maybe a cautious person wouldn't go down the slides because maybe they're a little bit afraid of doing something like that. So you can see what the word association games are attempting and what they're trying to do. So it's moving past the example, non-example, where it's no longer just yes or no. Is this the thing I taught you? It's now connect the thing I taught you to examples in the world. You're starting the transfer. You're kind of providing the transfer at this stage. And in the next stage, kids will be doing more of the transfer. But as you can see, cognitively, you're building that ladder. You're building those steps for kids to know the words really deeply. So I hope you found this episode to be helpful to explain day 3 of character vocabulary, word association games. I shared with you some of those slides. If you like those slides, you can get access to those slides at readwritemike.com/character-vocabulary to get those slides for yourself. They're pretty straightforward for you and kids to view and use. Anyway, I hope you have a great day in whatever you're doing with students, wherever you're listening from. And I hope to see you very soon at the next episode of the Read Write Mike podcast. Till then, take care.